Just a few weeks ago, on a rainy spring night, I was home working on some paperwork. I sat at my desk in the living room, exhausted but trying to push through with the help of coffee. Every so often, I'd stretch or rub my eyes to stay awake. During one of those breaks, I leaned back and casually glanced toward the window and nearly screamed. A man's face was pressed against the glass, staring straight at me with the creepiest smile I'd ever seen. He didn't flinch when I saw him. He didn't move. He just stared. I jumped up from my chair in shock. Before I could say anything, the man slowly backed away and disappeared into the dark. I stood frozen, trying to process what I had just seen. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to peek outside. He was gone, but muddy footprints led away from the window into the woods. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, following the prints. It was stupid, I know, but curiosity got the best of me. I walked up to where the trees thickened, and that's when I noticed something horrifying. The footprints were facing toward my house. That meant whoever it was had come from the woods and was still around. I turned to run back inside, heart pounding. But when I looked toward the house, someone was now inside, staring at me through the window. I bolted down the street, banging on my neighbor's door until they let me in. They called the police. When the cops arrived, no one was in my house, but the back door had been forced open, likely just after I stepped outside. If I hadn't left when I did, I would have come face to face with that man. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened. That night changed the way I see my own home. I double-check every lock now. Let me know if you'd like title Sug. It was a regular night. I was relaxing at home, alone, enjoying the peace and quiet of a long weekend. After a messy breakup a few months back, I kept the house for myself. A typical suburban home. It was late, maybe 10 or 11 p.m., and I was sipping on a cold beer, flipping through TV channels. Then I heard a noise behind me. Not from the front door, but from the back of the house. It sounded like tapping. I paused the TV and walked toward the sound, assuming something had fallen. I checked the family room, then the kitchen, nothing. Figuring it was nothing, I sat back down. But then, I heard the tapping again, clearer this time, on a window. I got up, walked through the house again, and instantly felt off. One of the windows in the back was wide open. So was the basement door. That couldn't be a coincidence. Despite every horror movie warning, I went to check the basement. Maybe the alcohol dulled my judgment, or maybe it was pride. I was a big guy, not easily rattled. But descending those creaky stairs into the dark, unfinished basement was a mistake. The light barely worked. Shadows stretched into every corner, and the silence was thick. I felt exposed, like someone was watching. A wave of fear hit me, and I turned back, slamming the door shut and barricading it with the nearest heavy chair. I called 911, and luckily, an officer was already nearby. He arrived within minutes, flashlight and weapon drawn. When he went down into the basement, it took him less than 10 seconds to find the man. He had been crouched just a few feet away from where I had been moments earlier, and he was armed with a kitchen knife. The intruder claimed he was seeking shelter from the rain, which made no sense, because the weather was fine. They found out later he wasn't even homeless. He had an apartment and a job. Why he broke into my home, no one knows. But that night could have ended very differently if I hadn't left that basement when I did. From 2018 to 2020, I worked the overnight shift at a gas station. It wasn't glamorous, but I preferred the solitude. Fewer customers meant less work, and I liked that. My first year was mostly normal hours, but my manager eventually agreed to give me overnights. At first, I enjoyed the peace, but I hadn't realized just how boring those shifts would be. After 10 p.m., hardly anyone came in. Occasionally, someone would stop to fuel up, but I mostly stood around trying to kill time. One night around midnight, I decided to take the trash out by the gas pumps. I grabbed a few bags, dumped them into the dumpster out back, and nearly jumped out of my skin when I saw a man standing behind it. He was completely still, just staring at me with a blank expression. I nervously apologized, saying I didn't see him there, but he didn't respond. As I walked away, I realized how bizarre it was. He didn't look homeless or drunk, just out of place. I glanced back, and he was gone. Thinking it was just a weird encounter, I brushed it off and went back inside. 15 minutes later, I saw something move in the corner of my eye, inside the store. I looked toward the back room and thought I saw a figure. Maybe I was tired and imagining things, but curiosity got the better of me. As I approached the doorway, I leaned my head in, and that same man was there, hiding right by the wall. Before I could react, he lunged at me with a knife, swinging wildly. I stumbled back into a shelf and ran out of the store as fast as I could. I called 911 from down the street. It was foggy that night, so I couldn't see if he left the building. When the police arrived, he was already gone. They never found him. I never went back after that. Maybe he was insane. Maybe he planned to rob me or worse. But that image of his twisted, rage-filled face haunts me to this day. I was on a road trip across the states, headed to meet up with my family and a couple of friends on the West Coast. Along the way, I booked a cabin for just one night. The plan was simple: arrive late, eat, shower, sleep, then hit the road early the next morning. I'd already been driving for 9 hours and was completely exhausted when I arrived. The cabin was far more isolated than I expected. Maybe it was just the fact that it was nighttime and deep in the woods, but I thought I had booked a place in a small rental community. Instead, it stood alone in the middle of nowhere. I parked on the gravel and walked up to the cabin. One odd detail immediately stood out. The front door didn't match the rest of the cabin. It was a heavy, modern steel door on a structure that otherwise looked like it belonged to the 1960s. Inside, it was just a single room with a bed, a kitchenette, a couch, and a small TV. It had a dated, worn feel, but I didn't care. I made a quick dinner, cleaned up, and crashed into bed. I passed out instantly, but just about an hour later I woke up, not because of a noise, but because of a feeling. Something was wrong. I sat up and listened, but the cabin was dead silent. Still uneasy, I peeked through the window next to the bed. To my surprise, I saw something moving in the woods. It took me a few seconds to register that it was a person, walking in the pitch-black forest with no flashlight or light source. That alone was disturbing enough. I watched for about 30 seconds until they faded into the darkness. I waited a few more minutes, but nothing happened, so I got back in bed. Sleep didn't come easy. I was laying there for almost 40 minutes, eyes shut but restless, when I heard a sudden knock at the door, just feet from my bed. I jumped up, heart racing. Then I heard a man's voice shout, "Hey, open up. Open the door now. I know you're in there." His tone was angry, threatening. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my phone and tried calling 911. At first, the call wouldn't go through. My phone had no signal and was trying to use Wi-Fi or data. Eventually, I got connected and an operator said an officer was on the way. Meanwhile, the man outside kept banging on the door. I couldn't tell if he was trying to break it down or just scare me, but the noise was relentless. After a minute or two, it stopped. Then, I heard the sound of glass shattering. He had broken into my car. I stayed frozen until police arrived. By then, the man was gone, but there were clear signs that he had run into the woods. What made the situation worse was what the cabin owner told police later. Apparently, someone else had a similar experience months earlier. A man banging on the door, yelling. In that case, the renter left in the morning and the owner found the door bashed in. He never reported it, just replaced the door with the heavy one I'd seen. I left the cabin early the next morning, still shaken. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but I think about it constantly.